Welcome, everybody.
Hey, hey. Good boy, Tucker.
Work smarter where you want.
This is learning at its most fun.
All right. Hello, everyone. So thank you for joining us in this Takeover Tuesday event. I know the topic today couldn't be any better with how much everything has changed. I know when I work with offices, they're constantly wondering, what should change, what has changed, what's coming up. And that's exactly what we're here to discuss today. So very open conversation. We want to talk strategy together and what's going on today. So today we're super excited to be joined by Neal Quon. Neal is one of the best people I know. We've been super excited to get him to take over a Tuesday here. He's a best friend of Redtail, a regular in our office and our meetings, and he's a constant resource to us as we develop new products and features. So Neal is also an advisor himself, so he comes head to toe with that knowledge of serving clients and succeeding in the industry. He also is the founder of Quon, which I know in working with offices is a very highly sought after practice management service. So he's here to discuss with us the ways to adapt and survive in this changing business landscape. So I'll go ahead and hand it over for him to discuss.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nora. Can you guys hear me okay? Am I coming through?
Yes.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, thank you everybody for taking time out of your days. It's amazing when Nora and I first kind of put our heads together to do this webinar. Actually, it was originally going to be back in February, and then I unfortunately had a scheduling conflict, so we had to push it forward to where we are today. And even from that time to where we are today, the world has continued to evolve. And so really the focus of what I want to be able to share with you is an open dialogue, really in a lot of ways focused around the evolution of what is happening in our practices. And so as Nora had shared, I am a fee-based financial advisor in Southern California. And in 2009, actually, my partner, Blaine Warren, and I founded a company focused on helping financial advisors optimize the technology that they select. So back in the day, and this was at the beginning of, I guess, the proliferation of online dating, we used to joke that our services were like eHarmony for financial advisors and financial technology, because there's so many choices out there, right? How do you really find the optimal set that's good for you based on your work culture? And so we really modeled our service based on much the way a financial planner works with our customers. And here's my gratuitous plug, right? So I'm a proud graduate of the Texas Tech University Financial Planning System. So I must say that my life's work and my experience has really been modeled really around my approach to consultation and advice in much the same way we work with clients is the same way that we work with advisors in helping them really figure out where are they now versus where they want to be in the future. And so the areas that we actually cover are broad in various aspects of financial services. A lot of people think it's just about the technology, right? And just like when you make an investment allocation recommendation, right, it's not just about the position. It's not. And so that's the same lens that we look at advising firms on. And when we talk about firms, we actually work primarily in the independent space. So primarily that breakaway point where wirehouse or captive agents are breaking away and they're first entering their foray into the independent broker-dealer world. We also work with them as they break away into the RIA space and also what we call up the food chain. So we provide a fee-only focused consult on helping firms, custodians, broker-dealers, advisory firms, one-man shops, ensemble firms, on what are the right tools that you need to be able to implement process-wise to stay current regardless of the environment that we're in. And so talking about the environment that we're in today, right? Who would have thought a year ago, 2 years ago, that we would have had this global pandemic? Some might say, well, Bill Gates knew that it was coming, right? right? He was a big prognosticator, and he kind of knew, he had the wherewithal to kind of be thinking outside the box, to think that there is something that could come that could completely disrupt our lives. So a year ago, the market was down 35%. We started to creep our way out of it, right? And with every big market turnaround, right, there's a big name, right? We had the dot-com bust, we had the mortgage crisis in 2008, and of course, last year was the great lockdown. So I don't know where many of you are. I'm in Southern California, as I mentioned before. We are technically still on a quasi lockdown. Things are opening up. I'm in Orange County. I'm looking so forward to being able to go out to eat again at my favorite restaurants, hopefully, without a mask, although I have a 5-year-old at home. So he always asks, well, why do I still have to wear a mask? Because he's not vaccinated. So to help them feel safe, we still sometimes wear masks, but that's our new world, right? And when we talk about what that meant for challenges in the advisory firms that we consulted over the last year, in keeping in mind the idea of people, process, and technology, we were always talking about it from the perspective of what does that mean for your processes when we talk about trends related to the firm? Well, last year upended all of that, right? And so we've largely come out of that. A lot of advisors are really thriving, right? You have your biggest years of growth, just like when there's a big pullback in the market, there's always a big rebound. Well, just like there was a big pullback, a lot of people were saying, I don't know if I could stomach that ride ever again. And this is where services that you provide as a financial advisor are even more critical, now more than ever, right? And the challenge that we have now is that the dialogue has changed. It's no longer about the people in the workplace and the processes that we got to put into a workflow inside of Redtail. And the technology that we use to do it. Now, because of the environment we're in, the people, process, and technology equation now deeply involves the collaboration with your customer and how do they engage with you, right? So I'm going to talk today about some trends overall that we see within financial services practice management. And you're going to see a theme here. And at the end of the day, what I'll say is, as much as things have changed, the more things have stayed the same. And I say that in most of you who are on this call are already forward-thinking financial advisors. You've already implemented technology, right? So you've been using tools like Redtail. You've already been working in the cloud. So hopefully when the bottom fell out last year and everybody's business model had to quickly adapt, you were actually okay, or the pivot was minimal, right? But let's talk about some of the trends that we're starting to see coming up now, right? So obviously, because we're dealing with data, hopefully, you're in your encrypted servers and secure connections when you're office, but now the idea of working, right? The idea of working your workspace has become much more fluid, right? And you'll talk about being able to access data from anywhere, right? So when Brian and the marketing team over at Redtail said, hey, your Redtail, work where you want, when you want, how you want, that was never more true than last year. And I will honestly say probably for the foreseeable future, because now what have advisors, the new reality for advisors is, hey, are we going to go back to that brick and mortar office? Yeah, mostly a lot of them will. However, what has that changed when we bring the customer into the equation? Customers are always, our clients were always worried about, hey, I got to take time out to go to your office. And now they've all gotten used to meeting with us all online, right? The ability to access, you and your team and to collaborate with your team on an on-demand basis, that necessity to be right in front of your face every time. We've seen trends in advisory firms where they've gone to more snack-sized meetings versus this big multi-hour long review, right? And so we'll talk about that as a trend. But all at the end of the day, the overarching first bullet point was always from the perspective, especially of compliance, but maintaining the protection of the data that is now being transmitted online. So we're actually seeing an evolution and request for more collaboration, document sharing. You can't bring documents into the office because of social distancing. You could snail mail it, but now it's really, how do you securely deliver information and access that information anywhere you are?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, it reminds me almost when everyone was worried about newspapers are going away. what's happening? How are we going to get our news? How are marketers going to get out there to people? But it's almost just the medium changes, like the service or the skill of storytelling never went away, right? It just
Correct.
went on a different medium. So I think I'm seeing that again here with what's going on in finance.
Right, exactly. Right. The more things change, it's not that things have fundamentally changed. We haven't had a paradigm shift. It's just the requirement that people used to think about how they consumed information has now pivoted. Right.
Yeah.
And the platforms that they use to access that information has pivoted. Right. So one of the core principles we always talk about, and you'll hear this at every red tail training you go to, is the CRM is the hub of the business, right? And if it's not in the CRM, it didn't happen, right?
Yeah.
Right. We talk about that a lot. And so now more than ever, we've seen trends in advisors really adopting and concentrating on their CRM as a core business tool, where many advisors, even in their best wishes prior to the pandemic, were really still using, sometimes unfortunately, Redtail just as a digital Rolodex. They realize now I'm working in a hybrid model, separated from my teams. No longer are they just available at arm's reach for me to get a quick piece of information. The reliance on good documentation and process management got brought to the forefront so that things didn't fall through the cracks as everybody was actually making changes to how they still responded to the scariness of the market last year, right? Also, too, what we're seeing is changes and evolutions in how advisors are continuing to hold themselves out to the public for referrals, right? No longer are you able to do, not that you were just doing, some advisors do drop offs, some advisors take walk-ins, right? Now, especially with the change in the kind of what we call the SEC rule around testimonials, right? The pivot towards digital marketing and making your presence known through platforms like Facebook, obviously LinkedIn, Instagram, but now YouTube, right? Everybody wants to be a YouTuber now, a thought leader. We're starting to see a big evolution towards that, especially now that people can comment and leave testimonials for your services. The modern advisor and trend that we've seen that really got pushed forward to continue to demonstrate your thoroughness as a thought leader and your expertise as a financial professional have evolved now to a completely digital platform. Another thing what I would say to you, and those are all good things, right? Now I'll talk a little about some of the kind of the two negative things that are just more annoyances more than anything. It's also about that the adapting of what's happening in the market is what we call time blur. And I don't know if many of you have, I suffer from this a little bit because people are so used to you being at home. We're all on lockdown. You can't go somewhere. And so people are used to having you be available all the time. And you're finding that blur between when do I shut it off at home and walk out of my home office, right? And so self-service scheduling tools have actually been proven to be an effective way to manage firms if you use them correctly. So when I talk about scheduling tools, y'all have probably already started using them. Tools like Schedule Once, Calendly, X.AI. And some advisors have been reticent to adopt those types of tools because they don't want to give up control of their calendar. Well, a lot of those tools now you can actually, if you use properly, can really segment, hey, these are my times that are only available for client service, or these are my times available for meetings or introductory calls. If you have a clear plan in place, you can actually create availability tranches on those tools to make sure you safeguard and protect your time. And the last one, of course, I call this, want a Zoom as revenge, because, hey, you want to Zoom, you want to jump on a Zoom, everybody wants to meet on Zoom. We're meeting on Zoom today, right? And
yeah.
So how many times have y'all been in a meeting with a client or with your team and you guys end up playing some sort of version of video conference bingo? Hey, even today, hey, Nora, your mic's muted, right? You get a check mark on the box. Or,
Yeah.
hey, your signal's breaking up, right? So I thought this was kind of fun just because, teams are finding different ways to collaborate, right? We're having quick stand-up meetings. We're having weekly staff meetings all over Zoom. Zoom has now become Kleenex in a lot of ways, right? Whatever your video conferencing platform of choice would be, most people are now just calling, hey, let's jump into a Zoom. But, this is not anything new, right? We've always had GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar. We've had, Uber conference. There's lots of different platforms out there. And now one of the things that we're getting a lot of requests on in our consult is, hey, which conferencing platform should we use? And again, just like any investment, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. What are the needs you're going to have? What we love now about, hey, and like that was great. I got to tell you, you guys remember a couple of years ago that there was a political analyst, I think, talking to like Fox News, and he's in South Korea, and his little daughter comes toddling in and wants to talk to his dad, and the mom comes in mortified. That happens to us probably once a week. What I love is that this pandemic has actually allowed us to be able to allow our clients and our families to show us a lot of grace in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it like humanizes you.
Exactly. Your cat popped up. My son hears me on the calls every day, and you guys can see he's 5 years old now, but Mr. Chubby Cheeks in the background there. That's one of my favorite pictures. But I ended up creating a different environment in my home office. This is who I am, right? How do I get to show my personality when it's just me on a digital screen, right? That skill, that opportunity to really construct and demonstrate that you're a real person, that used to happen in the conference room. Well, now how do you do that at home? So people get really creative with, digital backgrounds or whatever. But, I have little things in my background, or like I said before, I'm a big Texas Tech fan. This is my Texas Tech football helmet, right? So I got this from the Alumni Association. But all that being said, people have gotten really creative in how they work from home. And that's a really great thing. And a lot of advisors we've spoken to are actually contemplating their work from home policy. And you'll see that. And this was actually verified by a survey and a study that was done by Dimensional Funds. So last year, what were the top concerns? This was as of 2020, top concerns due to COVID-19. Obviously, market volatility, increases in taxes are really driving some concern. What is this going to mean for me as a client on my financial plan? What are we going to see globally, right? It's a lot of it's unknown. And there's, not making a political commentary, but a lot of people are saying, well, shoot, there's going to be a lot happening. A lot of this stimulus money needs to get paid for, but there's all this pent up demand. People want to get out. They're tired of being on lockdown. They're going to go and spend money, right? So when is that wave going to happen, and how are you going to adjust? And how people have adjusted is changing how they engage, right? So communication channels with the most increased advisor usage during COVID-19, virtual meetings and the telephone. Telephone still ranked number one.
Wow.
The reason for that, you would think that it would be virtual meetings, right? But it was the telephone, just literally old school, picking up the phone and connecting to a real voice, right? Letting people know that things are going to be okay. This is what we designed your asset allocation for, right? We can't predict the market. You can't time the market. But if you have Michael Kitces says this all the time, asset allocation means you're always going to have to say sorry. In this case, asset allocation in March of last year hopefully meant that you weren't down 35% like the media was touting, right? And that you were better positioned to recover. So also from the Dimensional Fund study, right? What did that mean for practitioners? What did it look like from their study? So firms were still continuing, 90% of the firms were saying that they were going to continue to have their firms work remotely and maintaining firm culture, what we call the business culture. So this is what I was talking about earlier. Quon Warren, we practice this ideology of people, process, and then technology. It's about the people that are doing the job that they feel best skilled and best suited for, the processes that they're responsible, that they're the stakeholders for, and then that drives the technology. On a complete basis, that defines your firm's, your office's work product, your business culture. And so what many firms are really focusing on because of COVID is how do we make sure that we still maintain that sense of identity, that unique value proposition? Because people, when we talk about investment products, not many things are proprietary. Everything is pretty much commonly available to most of us, right? People end up doing business with you because they trust you, they like your approach to advice. That's part of your firm's culture, your identity. So finding creative ways to continue to articulate that, to communicate that, has been paramount to many firms moving forward, so that they know that throughout the pandemic, how are we continuing to service you? What is our commitment to protect you and still do so in a safe manner? So firms planning to offer work from home policies to employees in the future, they already offer one. Yes, for all selected roles, we're actually seeing that expand. Many of them are contemplating, hey, do we need full-blown brick and mortar? Yes, or do we allow people to work remotely because they've proven that they can still be effective this year? This was a really big incubator to test these theories. And guess what? We see a dramatic increase, believe it or not, in workplace satisfaction because they can work where they want when they want. All right, so
That's
changes
true. I feel like it's almost like a couple years ago. Remember, people were scared of robo advisors. They're like, oh, robo advisors are going to take over. People aren't going to need me anymore. But it's almost the opposite. People are using your services because you know them. You know how many children that they have. You know that what their goals are in the future. You know what they've been through. So it's more of that relationship that they're looking for that you need to maintain.
Correct. Investment products in a lot of ways can be commoditized, right? And so it is that human connection that we've all been lacking. Then this last year is really driving that point home even more. And the fact that one of the trends I had mentioned before was that instead of having 2-hour, 1 hour long annual reviews, many advisors are moving to thematic based, or what we call snack size meetings, 15-minute stand-ups. Hey, just touching base, trying to maintain that dialogue to stay top of mind to that customer. And at the end of the day, many clients are now afraid, even though the market's been running, they're like, okay, we're getting nervous. We're getting so close to the top. When is the bottom going to fall out? It's going to happen. And can I recover? Right.
Yeah, I feel like there's no one that's been bothered more than you guys and probably real estate agents that are like, when's the crash? Is it gonna crash? Do I need to buy in now? Do I need to pull out now? And it's like, you guys have been prepared for this. We've set your portfolio up for this. Don't worry.
So being a Texas native, I'm going to wave to all my friends back in Texas, but I got to tell you, I got to apologize for my neighbors that were here in California because they're helping, but also ruining Texas because everyone's leaving California. Real estate is going through the roof. Oh my gosh. I think they're saying conservatively, 9 to 12% increase just in this last year. There are people, we're getting back to those bidding wars. I have some other advisors that we were talking to. They are moving to Nevada to help minimize their tax situation because it's prudent planning, because they're trying to capitalize on their increased real estate portfolio, and they're just trying to take their money and run. And a lot of them, we're seeing this flight from tech companies, right? So what was it, Twitter last year said, we are going to adopt a complete work from home model. We don't know if we're going to have everybody come back. Apple just came out and they said, hey, we're going to go ahead and we're asked that all of our team members come back starting in September, at least 3 days a week, right? So different policies are being implemented by different firms. I think for you guys on this call, identifying what's going to be right for your firm's culture and the expectations of the clients that you're working with are going to be a big driver in underscoring that. And let's talk about the evolution in the market for people that are advice seekers, right? So obviously we have our, the boomers, our retirees, our Gen Xers, our pre-retirees, but even the way millennials are starting to seek, so I'll say our millennials and our Gen Zers, and I'm sure there's some X5 planning members on this call here as well. One evolution that we've seen is the deliverable, simplified client deliverables, right? And no longer are you handing across, and we've seen this trend evolve over the last few years, but we've now gotten down to where we're starting to see simplified one-pager financial planning deliverables, right? So having consolidated information that you can reconstruct or deliver from your planning tools that are basically executive summary type of digestible bits of information. How can I see a quick summary of my financial health? It's not about your rate of return now. It's how much money do I have left over? One of the wisest things I think I ever learned from one of my mentors, and this is kind of cheesy, but he says, remember, Neal, you can't spend your rate of return. You can only spend what's in your account at the end of the day. And so helping clients understand throughout all these changes that have evolved in the market, right? What they have at the end of the day is going, and how I can articulate that they are okay. People at the, when the market is scary, are just looking for that peace of mind. And tools in the technology that evolve that exist rather in the fintech marketplace today are really driving towards these things that we're seeing. So what have I said? Advisors are talking about making changes to their websites to be more digitally engaging. They want to be able to express their culture. It's not just your typical, bull and bear iconography, right? They're providing more information on COVID-19 as it relates to what their firm's policies and operational processes are going to be on a moving forward basis. They're focusing on building it right. They're going to be, like Wayne Gretzky says, you want to be where the puck is going to be, not where it's at. So now, as things are starting to open up, there's a focus on prospecting and rebuilding that pipeline and putting out that thought leadership. Hey, we made it through the pandemic, right? Asking for referrals, moving towards a digital platform to allow customers and clients and even window shoppers to engage you guys more effectively through digital platforms. And then the big one, more likely to focus on employee development. Thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for being loyal through the pandemic. It was scary, but we all did it together. So there's a team camaraderie, a team. One of the things that I'm seeing now is a lot of disc profiles, right? We're starting to see, people's true colors are coming out. It's like disc profile, any of these personality profiles. A lot of the firms we collaborate with, that work with us, we'll actually go through an exercise and we'll see, okay, where are your strengths, right? Where are your weaknesses? And we actually have found ways to identify where process workflows break down, not because the processes weren't documented, you had the wrong people doing the wrong jobs. And so what we're starting to see is realignment with employee responsibilities within firms during this time. And again, this was all brought on. I heard one advisor say, man, COVID-19, it was a gift in ugly gift wrapping, right? In ugly packaging. And it's really a matter of your perspective. Did you guys really thrive in this environment, or did you shrink away?
That's true. And if you could save $15,000 on a lease of a building, that's great overhead that's back in your pocket. And I know I bet it's mutual, because your advisors might be wanting more, digital bits of meetings, but I think you guys want that too. Because I notice when I'm training offices now, before it would be in a conference room, the whole office is sitting down, they'd want a 1-2 hour session. Now it's different. Now they just want, quick 30-minute digestible chunks. Everyone get on the call, walk through what our questions are, and then move on and maybe have another session later.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of mutual there, I think.
Yeah, and actually there's a practice that I have implemented with some of our firms that we consult, and even with my own clients, we'll do walking meetings, meaning where, because we're all sitting at home all day, you got to get out, you got to get active, you got to stay mobile, not mobile and from a digital perspective, but mobile from a moving perspective. So there's a park right down the street from where I live. So a lot of times, if I don't need to be on the screen and we're just reviewing things, I'll have my iPad with me, or I'll have my phone with me, right? And I'll talk about this in a moment, but it's this idea of having access to information wherever you're at. But let's go back to this CRM as a hub. Now more than ever before, advisory firms have been really doubling down on their workflow processes. And I'll tell you, and Nora, you could confirm this, right?
Yeah.
Probably the number one most utilized feature inside of workflow, inside of Redtail, is going to be workflows and automation.
Yeah.
Hands down, right? Right. And so if you have not taken the time to really map that out and to think about what are your core repeatable processes, I want to give you guys a couple of tips. And you guys will typically hear this on your Redtail trainings, or the trainers that you've listened to the webinars. Don't overcomplicate your workflows. If you get to a point where you have a 30-step workflow, your team is never going to go in. The task of actually completing the workflow oftentimes will take longer than completing the task itself. So, right? So when you're thinking about your workflows, what are good processes that you want to turn into a workflow? It's not those ad hoc, one-off types of special requests. It's those scalable, repeatable processes that you use on a regular basis. So client onboarding is an example. And we'll talk about that as it relates to the whole digital marketing, that the proliferation of digital marketing. How are you engaging clients online? How do you send out your fact finders? How do you send out your client engagement kits? How do you bring that information back into the CRM? So in this call, I'm trying not to specifically name other vendors, right? This is a Redtail focused call, but if you look at the partners page on Redtail, there's a whole host of different specific tools that can help with fact finding, data gathering, client engagement, right? That can integrate and bring all that rich data back into the Redtail system, which can then seed your financial planning tool, right? So then you start thinking from a technology perspective, what is that integrated data pathway? Mm-hmm. Just because data exists at Schwab or now TD or Schwab or whatever custodian or Albridge, doesn't mean I pull it down from there. What if I can get the information over here? So thinking clearly about not only what data goes into your CRM, but what do you do with the data and where do you send it after the fact? So if you can adopt this idea of the CRM as a hub and think logically about your workflows and your processes, all of that can be managed. And I think about this. This is sometimes is a sticky word for some people, but that accountability that's needed for stakeholder ownership or management of certain processes, that can only help your firm get better. So don't be afraid to delegate and give ownership of your processes to key trusted team members. A lot of times I hear advisory firms, they'll say, well, this is what the principal wants, right? But then the staff will always tell me, this is what they say they want, but in reality, this is what happens. This is what we need to get done. So if you haven't already done so, and this is universal to not just because of COVID, but a lot of firms are doubling down on really getting their staffs, their operational staff's feedback on how is this really happening, because they've all been tested in the pandemic around really, do we need to change our workflows? Do we need to adopt or adapt our processes to make them more streamlined, because you got to work and you got to move faster. Okay, so this is what I was talking about in my walking meetings. A lot of people say you got to go mobile, you got to be in the cloud. And we don't like to say the mobile business, right? You can use a mobile device. There's an old iPhone there. And I left that icon there for an old iPhone because we've evolved, right? Now, Apple yesterday, believe it or not, in their developers conference, they announced that they are going to be getting into the meetings game in a way with FaceTime meetings, right? You'll be able to actually collaborate and send invites for a FaceTime meeting. So depending on the devices that you have, you can have multi faces on the screen, but they are moving, right? Because I see that that's where the proliferation of online meetings and not having to be physically in front of people are coming to the forefront. So I talked about walking meetings. A lot of times I can actually share my screen. And this is not a plug for Apple per se, but even mobile devices, these tools that we use that are just in the back of our pockets every day or in our purses, are going to be your new workspace, your new conference room, right? No longer are we just going to be able to share our screens and our desktops from a platform like Zoom. The tools are already evolving to allow you to do that there. So making sure, even from a hardware perspective, that you have the right tools. Like one of the best investments I made in the pandemic was I bought the iPad Pro. And I'm using that whiteboard and stylus session like crazy every day. And I said I'm not going to plug any fintech vendors, but I'll tell you tools that I have found to be phenomenally useful in the pandemic. I can access all my clouds, all my files in the cloud. Centralized storage is a big thing about the portable business, is being able to access your data whenever you are, or wherever you are, whenever you want, from the tools and devices that you use on a regular basis. And it's all about that, sync and collaboration, backup and sync, virtual and remote. that's not a new idea. That's why I was saying, right? It's not that the pandemic brought this to bear, right? It didn't create this need. It just put a spotlight on it, right? And it's forced a lot of people to move to this space, to operate in this manner. Kind of going back to what you were saying there, Nora, it's not that things have changed, the medium has changed. The spotlight, the focus on how people interact has now changed.
Yeah, that's funny. I thought you were going to say invest in a modem and router.
No, definitely not. I mean, let's talk about that from a cybersecurity perspective,
Yeah.
right? If you're out and about, you definitely want to make sure that you're securing your connectivity, right? So not that you can go to Starbucks anymore, but what do we always talk about? Hey, you're at a conference, you jump on free Wi-Fi. Wherever you're at, you're looking for that free Wi-Fi connection. Well, make sure minimally that you either tethered to your phone because you control that access, you control that connection to the internet. You want to make sure that data is being transmitted in a manner that on a connection that you own, right? That you created, that's secure because let's say you have your own password to your phone. Or if not, if you don't have a tetherable device or a pocket hotspot, definitely install a VPN to make sure that your connection, your session, anything where you're connected to the internet is always encrypted, and you're creating that protective tunnel around your data connection, especially if you're accessing account information, right? I think that goes for this group. I'm sure that's old hat. You guys are all doing that, right? So I'll move on from there. But okay, so digital marketing. I touched on this before. These trends, right? So Twitter, right? Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn were always the kind of the big three for social media, digital marketing. We also had to be careful of compliance, right? And you still do, but we're now seeing evolution of the way the different advisors are engaging and promoting their thought leadership. So Instagram stories, Facebook stories, YouTube, TikTok, right? There are advisors literally that are trying to break out their dancing moves on TikTok just to show personality, right? How can I have fun at home or whatever? But again, the real thrust here is how are advisors continuing to engage and maintain their business pipeline? A lot of that is through that digital marketing, whether marketing, again, as I shared before, where have we come from and where are we going? How are we communicating our process? How are we communicating our core values? The fact that we are real people, you're allowed now, I think, to really demonstrate a little bit of personality and your business culture through these platforms. Right? So I guess my one caveat there I should say is check with your back office, especially your compliance department before you actually post anything online and get it approved. I guess we should always say that, right? Okay. And the biggest thing, time management. So this was that time blur I talked about earlier, right? So firms have really embraced workflows and processes to maintain morale, right? Because and when I say it's morale, the whole people, process, and technology equation is not just for what you're doing internal, but like I said, external. Or what are those external forces? Those are your clients, your prospects, the people that are really scared about what may be coming or what they had to come through. Is this another .com bust where I lost 50%? Is this another 2008 where I lost 35%? Well, we don't know, right? And so people are self-subscribing into your calendars, or they're always asking, pinging you for communication, pinging you for time. And so I know not all firms have adopted this, and I hope that they will, but tools like Redtail Speak and your text features are now a lot of firms are starting to allow you to not speak, but are allowing you to really get out there and connect with clients in other ways that are much more, that are faster, more digestible, instead of always having to stop and send an email. So being able to capture that communication and store that and archive it in your CRM is going to be really critical. So if you guys have not looked into those solutions, again, there are tools that are available that are now allowing advisors to become more digitally tech savvy for that time engagement. And like I said before, one of the best practices, if you guys are using scheduling tools, like some that I mentioned before, you want to make sure that you create different availability schedules based on what you're trying to do. So, because if not, your time will blur into each other and you're going to just find yourself going from meeting after meeting after meeting. So make sure you give yourself enough time. What I always tell advisors is set a meeting for 45 minutes. So you have a 15-minute buffer to document and transcribe your notes, or use some of the really powerful transcription tools and partners that Redtail uses that will actually automatically deliver activities, tasks, task assignment, and your notes directly into your CRM. I've seen a lot of that happen and get adopted very quickly. I would say, and probably one of the biggest things that we've seen from a social distancing perspective moving forward is the whole idea of social distancing and how do we make sure that we're still engaging with our customers without having to see them face to face. One of the biggest tools that we've seen that has been broadly adopted now is digital signature. DocuSign across the board has probably been the most, if I had to put my finger on the single most important technology that has been implemented during the pandemic, has been firms and custodians relaxing their requirements a little bit for web signatures and beginning to adopt uses of digital signatures more frequently and accepting that as a means now. So hopefully that trend will continue, right? And this whole straight through processing and online account opening, client onboarding is just that much faster, right?
Yeah, I think that's what is true with everything is it requires that front end work. You have to put in that front end work to research or kind of map out everything. But if you dedicate that front end work, then in the moment, you're saving endless time.
Exactly.
So I think that's important. And I know I saw a funny picture on the internet the other day. It's like a European out of office message is like, oh, I'm going to the lake, try again after summer. And an American one is like, I'm getting kidney surgery, but you can call me on my cell phone at any time.
Pretty much. That's that always available mentality that we've kind of put out there, right? So it's okay to be selfish. It's okay to put good, healthy boundaries around your time so that you can still function and do the things you need to do for your team, your family, and your customers.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that with emails too, because when you're getting emails or tickets constantly throughout the day, it takes away that fulfillment of seeing that zero.
Yes.
You know?
Do you subscribe to inbox zero? Do you use that mentality where at the end of the day you're trying to get to like all emails have been addressed? That's hard to do now.
Yes. And it ruins your day when you're seeing it bubble up and bubble up. So if you just dedicate time in the day where you're just going to do that, get it to zero, and then not look at it until that time again, it could add some joy to your life a little bit.
It's the little things nowadays, right? That is really, I get you. I get you. I encountered an advisor, and he is actually, and he showed me this was his junk mail, but his junk email was like, he was celebrating. Look, I have 450,000 unread emails, but then he showed me like, this is where I send all of my like email subscriptions, online subscriptions, shopping, all that stuff where they send ads. He's gotten so granular that he uses just that email just to collect that, so that his work email, his client email is just pristine. It's not cluttered up.
I like that.
Yeah. So, all righty. So let me recap, and I've been kind of jawing at y'all for a bit. So let me just recap. Where have we come, right? So this is almost like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We started last year in crisis management. How did we assess, top firms shifted their focus. They sat back, they assessed their situation and developed a strategy, right? And we now evolved where home is where the office is, right? We are now all working from home. Some of us may continue to choose to work from home because we found a medium in which we're able to still be effective and in a lot of ways find that work-life balance, right? Well, it brings its own challenges in some ways, right? But the workplace has become a very fluid concept, right? So, and what does that mean? That then means that your collaboration and communication models, both between your clients and your team, have to evolve. Many teams have used online collaboration project management suites to maintain communication and compartmentalize little virtual rooms to manage specific conversations. So tools like, well, I guess it's not fintech. I'll just kind of bring some experience from outside fintech, but Slack, right, as a big leader in collaboration and project management, you can literally assign tasks and communicate within your teams there But I would always still say, right, to the extent possible, keep everything that is relevant to your customers inside of the CRM so that you have that digital paper trail of what's actually occurred, so that if there are handoffs and reassignments in your tasks, that there is that digital handoff, so that there is that accountability, that stakeholder ownership for each of those. And the idea of, we all now have our heads in the cloud, right? Reliance and adoption of web-based services has become the norm. And I think that if you have not adopted that mentality, or have at least made strides to move towards that and really building out your overall strategy, you are going to be left behind. Because at the end, we're now looking at what does the future look like. The last 14 months has really challenged the many advisors to rethink their role, right? Are you an asset gatherer? Are you an advice giver? Are you a planner? It doesn't matter how you define yourself as an advisor. What really matters is how are you going to continue to evolve and have your firm stay relevant? Our tech forward, tech savvy advisors are implementing technology not only to service their firms where they are now, but it has now become the forefront of their client communication model, their digital marketing, to communicate even their succession plans for the next generation. And when you're looking at the wave of upcoming savers and investors, right, the millennials, the Gen Zers, right, the whole conversation on ESG, how are you able to articulate your firm's position of those matters, in a space where you're no longer in front of them face to face? So the adoption and the shift of focus towards digital platforms and tools have become a very big part of the conversation on maintaining relevance. So, with that, I've been speaking for about 45 minutes. I just want to thank everybody for the opportunity for joining today. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Nora and the team at Redtail, or get in touch with me. We're on Twitter at Quon Warren or at quonwarren.com. If there's anything we can do to help kind of give you point you in the right direction, right? We'd always love to add value more than the cost to retain our services. And just thank you for your time.
Thanks so much for joining us today for this particular session. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call at 800-206-5030, option 3 for support, or just shoot us an email over to support@redtailtechnology.com. Thanks a lot and have a great day.